Welcome to the next lecture. In today's lecture, we will talk about events and the categories of the events. So if we look at our design, then we can see that we on the event creation screen we have a choose category drop down, which means that events can have categories. For example, if we are creating an event for education, then obviously we will choose the category as education. If we are creating an event for sports, then we will choose the category of sports. Similarly, if we are creating any event of any type of category, which we need to choose from the available categories. So which means before actually creating the table of the event, we need to create the table of the categories of the events. So what we can call this table is, we can call this table as event categories, and in that event categories we can see which columns do we need it. So always we do need at the ID column, because you know that is auto incremented by default, and then the main column of any table. Then we do need the title column, in which we will save the category name of the events. Then we can have a column names is active, which means sometime we can activate and deactivate some of the categories. So when we are using them, so for example, if we create a category of education and then we want to hide that category but we don't want to delete it, then we can make there is active 0. And if we want to show that to the users back, then we can make it active as 1. Then obviously we always have a created at, so we can see that when that event category is actually created. And then we do also need an updated at column. So basically we do need these 5 columns. So if we head over to our database and see it, then we can see that we have 5 columns now for this table. So if I bring that columns over here, then we can see that the table name is event categories. So what we will do, we will go inside our database eventer, we will go to the tables, and we will create a table name event categories, and then we will put the 5 columns as the count. So then first column we always do need is the ID, and in the name we will put the ID, and then we need a title of that category obviously, and then we do need is active, created at, and updated at. Category is always linked to the events, so the ID is their primary key, so we will make it as we can make it as what we call it auto increment, right? So it will become primary automatically. Then in the title will be something like sports and those stuff, so we can make it 50 for example. As a length is active will be 1 length, and we will put 1 as is active, so any category which is actually created, that is active by default, and then they can make it later on disabled if they want it to be. And then for the created at, we will put the date and time, and we always put it as a current time stamp. Then we can also put this updated as timestamp and created and then we will set the current timestamp into this as well. Then we can set the attribute on update, so as soon we update it, it will update it accordingly. We don't need to put the lengths for the date and times because those are the default ones. We do not need to add any further column, so we do not click on the go and another column. So what we can do is we just create this table as by clicking on the save. Once we click on the save, we can see that the event categories table is created inside the eventer database, which is actually empty right now. There is no data inside it. So how we can insert the data? You know that you can insert it through the UI. From here you can put a category name. So for example, if we put as education and then we click go, it will create a row inside the event categories table, and we can see over here which is actually ID, title and education over here. Then if we want to create further categories and you want to learn through it the query, what we can do, we can go to SQL, we can write insert into event categories, and in which column we want the data to be saved, in title, and the values will be, for example, we want to create another event which is actually sports value. So if we try this out and see how it responds, so it's saying that you have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL version as near title values sports. So what could be the issue? So if we try to find it, one can be the issue if that we are putting single inverted commas, and because it's a string then we need to put the double inverted commas, but still it's giving the same issue. Insert into events, event categories, title values. So what could be the issue is here? We have already put a lot of data in our previous tutorial, so if you can figure out what could be the reason, then I think you will see it that way. So if I look it again, it's saying insert into event categories, title, insert into event categories, title. So I think title, because is a column, so we may not put it inside the inverted commas, right? So let's try it out. Okay, it's saying successfully saved. So you have learned this point that for the columns you never need to put the inverted commas. If we look at the event categories table now, and now we can see two categories over here. One is showing us the ID and as a column 1, 2, and in the second column we can see that it's showing us the title as education and sports. This is how you can create the event categories, and once we will come to this page of event creation, then we will choose the category from the drop down which we have created over here. Now if you want to do few more operations on that, for example, if you want to delete the category which is sports, then we go back to our SQL query again, then we will try it out what happens. Let's see. Delete from event categories where ID equals 2. This is the easiest way, I think. So let's try it out and see how it responds. If I click go, it asks me for a confirmation of delete. I click OK, and it says one row is affected. If I go back to event categories table, then I can see it has deleted one of the categories from here successfully. You can delete it by title as well. So for example, if I go back to SQL and write delete from event categories where title equals education, and then if I execute this query, it's asked me again for the confirmation, and it says one row is affected. If I go back to the event categories, then I can see that there is no category found over here again. So this is how you can delete the categories from the table of the event categories. Then for example, if you want to insert back again, then there is one more thing. So for example, if you want to insert that again, you can insert it through this front end, or you can write a query as well, which we wrote already. So this table as says one category is added successfully, and if we go back, then that category is added over here back. Then if we want to update this category, then you can go back to event categories, and what you want to actually update is you want to make its is active as 0, which means when we fetch the categories for this form, then we will not receive that category because that is not active in the database. So if I go back to the SQL and I do write update event categories set is active equals 1, where id equals 3. So if I do execute this, and then we can see 0 rows are affected. The reason is because that was already is active 1, that's why it says 0 rows affected, right? But we need to make it 0 because we are deactivating it. Is active 1 mean that category is active, is active 0 means that category is not active. So if you click go, and if we, it's saying 1 row is affected, and if we go back into the categories table, then you can see over here that is active is updated now. So this is how you can create the event categories table, add the data into the event categories table, and obviously then update and delete the data from the event categories table. So location table we have already created in the previous lectures. Then we have now event category table as well. In the next lecture we will talk about the attachments of the event and again the creation of the events. Thank you for watching.